Mr. Donovan was the kind of man everyone in town knew about, even if they had never met him face to face. People whispered his name in hushed tones at the grocery store, at the park, and even inside the very restaurant where he was most often seen. He was not famous like a movie star or a politician, but in his own way, he was far more noticeable. He was a millionaire businessman who carried himself with the sort of presence that made people step aside when he entered a room. From the outside, his life looked perfect. He drove shiny cars, always the newest model. He wore suits that seemed to be stitched from fabrics no one else in town could afford. His watch, always polished and glowing under the lights, was worth more than many people's cars. He sat in the finest corner of the restaurant, the seat reserved for him whether or not he called ahead. Yet, behind all that luxury, there was something about him that made waitresses dread seeing his name on the reservation list. It wasn't that Mr. Donovan was a criminal or that he used foul language, no, it was the way he carried his words. Every sentence seemed sharp, as though he was testing people to see if they would bend or break. He expected perfection in every detail. His water had to be served at exactly the right temperature, his food had to arrive at the table steaming hot, and his order had to be remembered without error. One small mistake, even something as small as forgetting an extra napkin, could lead to an icy stare or a curt remark that made the server's stomach twist with nerves. The restaurant staff often joked among themselves that serving Mr. Donovan was like walking on a tightrope you could not afford to slip, even once. Some servers lasted a week. Some lasted a single night. More than one had run into the staff room with tears welling up, muttering, "I can't do this anymore," as they untied their aprons. To be fair, Mr. Donovan always paid his bills on time. He even tipped generously when things were done exactly as he wanted. But that one was the hardest part. For most people, dining out was a pleasant experience, a chance to relax and enjoy. For him, it seemed more like a test of control. And the waitresses were the ones who always felt they were failing, no matter how hard they tried. The town itself was small enough that news spread quickly. Young waitresses who had just been hired were warned almost immediately, "If Mr. Donovan comes in, be careful. He's not like the other guests." The older staff members, the ones who had worked there for years, shared stories like ghost tales told around a campfire. "Remember when he sent back a dish 3 times because it was 1 degree too cold? Remember when he asked someone to rewrite the wine list because the handwriting was too messy?" At first, new hires thought the stories were exaggerated. Surely, no one could be that difficult. But the truth was clear the moment they saw him walk in. He had a way of looking around the room as though everything and everyone belonged to him. His eyes swept over the tables, the chairs, the staff, as though he were inspecting them for flaws. And somehow, he always found one. Yet, what puzzled many people was why he continued to visit that same restaurant. There were other places in town, equally fine, some even more elegant. But Mr. Donovan chose this one, week after week. Some whispered that it was because the chef was the best in the region. Others guessed that it was because the restaurant was close to his office. A few even wondered if perhaps, deep down, he liked the attention his behavior drew. For the restaurant manager, it was a challenge that could not be ignored. Mr. Donovan brought in money, and not just from his own meals. His presence created a kind of strange fame for the place. People would come in just to say they had seen him, the rude millionaire, in person. But for the staff, especially the waitresses, his visits felt like a storm cloud hovering over their heads. There were times when Mr. Donovan could be silent for most of the evening, speaking only to place his order and ask for the bill. Those were the nights when waitresses breathed easier, grateful that nothing had gone wrong. But there were other nights when he was restless, and his words came out sharper than usual. On those evenings, the atmosphere in the entire restaurant grew tense. Laughter at other tables became softer, staff moved more carefully, and even the clinking of glasses seemed quieter, as though everyone feared disturbing him. Some staff wondered why he was like this. "Maybe he's just lonely," one cook suggested. Maybe he doesn't know how to talk to people kindly. Others shrugged and said, that's just how some rich people are. They forget what it's like to be normal. Whatever the reason, the effect was the same. No waitress seemed able to last under his watchful, demanding eye. One evening, a new waitress named Emily was assigned to serve him. She had heard the warnings but believed she could handle it. She approached his table with a bright smile and a notebook in hand. "Good evening, sir, may I take your order?" she asked cheerfully. Mr. Donovan didn't return her smile. Instead, he said, "If you must use that notebook, at least write quickly. I don't like to wait." Emily's smile faltered, but she continued writing. Throughout the evening, she tried her best delivering food on time, checking on him politely. Yet, when she accidentally placed the fork slightly off-center, Mr. Donovan simply said, "Sloppy." That one word was enough to drain her confidence. By the end of the night, she was pale and quiet. The next day, she told the manager she couldn't continue. It became a cycle. One waitress after another would come, full of hope and determination, only to leave discouraged after serving him once or twice. The manager tried to rotate staff, hoping someone would find the secret to handling him, but no one did. His reputation only grew stronger. No waitress lasts with the rude millionaire. Despite all this, Mr. Donovan never seemed to notice the impact he had. He walked in, ordered his meals, gave his criticisms, and left without a second thought. To him, perhaps, it was nothing unusual. But to the waitresses, each encounter felt like a battle, one they rarely won. And so, the story of Mr. Donovan spread beyond the restaurant. People in nearby towns began to hear about him too. Some laughed at the stories, others shook their heads in disapproval. But for the staff who had to serve him, it was no laughing matter. His presence was both a curse and a strange kind of blessing. He brought in money, yes, but he also drove away good workers. What no one knew then was that things were about to change. A new waitress would soon arrive, one unlike any of the others before her. She was not stronger in appearance, nor more experienced. But she carried within her a quiet determination, and a reason for working that went far beyond earning a paycheck. And when she finally faced Mr. Donovan, the story everyone thought they already knew would take an unexpected turn. The weeks rolled on, and the restaurant's revolving door of waitresses never seemed to stop spinning. Every time a new face appeared in the dining area, the other staff would whisper, "Let's see how long she lasts." It wasn't meant to be cruel, it was simply the reality of working in a place where Mr. Donovan, the wealthy but impossible regular, came in at least twice a week. No matter how experienced, cheerful, or determined a waitress was, the result was usually the same. They would begin with confidence, telling themselves, "I can handle one difficult customer." But the moment Mr. Donovan sat down, their confidence began to crumble. His sharp eyes caught every small detail, every mistake, every hesitation. He rarely raised his voice, but the tone he used carried a weight that stung more than shouting ever could. One afternoon, a waitress named Lily took her turn. She had worked in cafes and diners before, where she charmed guests with her bubbly personality. She thought she had seen it all: rude customers, demanding families, impatient businessmen. Nothing had ever made her consider quitting. So when the manager nervously warned her about Mr. Donovan, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll win him over." When Mr. Donovan arrived that evening, Lily walked to his table with her brightest smile. "Good evening, sir, I'll be serving you tonight," she said. He glanced at her, then at the table. "The napkin is folded the wrong way," he said simply, before she had even finished speaking. Lily quickly corrected it, still smiling, but inside, her confidence cracked a little. The rest of the night went no better. Mr. Donovan sent back his soup twice, claiming it was not hot enough. When Lily asked politely if he would like anything else, he replied, "I would like people to do their jobs correctly." By the time he left, Lily's cheerful energy had drained away. She went home that night and told her roommate she wasn't sure she could return. By the end of the week, she handed in her apron. Her story was not unusual. Again and again, new waitresses arrived with hope, only to leave disheartened. Some lasted a month, some only a few days. Each time, the manager had to put up a new hiring notice, and the staff braced themselves for another cycle. It became almost a ritual. A new waitress would arrive, she would serve Mr. Donovan, she would struggle, and soon after, she would quit. The kitchen staff tried to stay out of it, though even they felt the weight of his presence. "Why does he keep coming back if he's never satisfied?" one of the chefs asked as he chopped vegetables late one night. "Maybe this is his way of feeling powerful," another suggested. The manager, tired but practical, simply said, "He pays well. As long as he comes here, we have to serve him. That's business." But business came at a cost. The staff room often echoed with sighs and whispered frustrations. Waitresses spoke about sleepless nights before their shifts, worrying whether they would be assigned to his table. Some would quietly trade sections, begging their co-workers to take him instead. The restaurant was beautiful, the pay was fair, and the customers were usually kind, but one man's presence overshadowed all the good. Outside the restaurant, Mr. Donovan was also known by reputation. Customers who dined there often shared their experiences with friends. "You won't believe it," one man told his neighbor, "there's this rich guy who makes waitresses cry." Another woman remarked, "I saw him send back a dish 3 times, it looked fine to me, but he said it wasn't good enough." These stories spread, adding fuel to his already infamous character. Yet, strangely, some people admired him. "At least he knows what he wants," one diner said. "He's not afraid to speak his mind." Others disagreed, shaking their heads. "There's a difference between confidence and being unkind," they replied. But whether admired or disliked, one fact remained the same: no one could ignore him. One winter evening, the situation reached a breaking point. The restaurant was full, with every table occupied. Families laughed over warm meals, couples celebrated anniversaries, and groups of friends toasted to new beginnings. Amid all the cheer, the atmosphere changed the moment Mr. Donovan walked through the door. The staff exchanged glances, silently praying not to be chosen for his table. That night, a young waitress named Hannah was assigned to him. She had only been working there for 2 weeks, still learning the ropes. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried his order. When she accidentally placed the bread basket on the wrong side of the table, Mr. Donovan looked at her and said, "If you don't know basic serving rules, perhaps you should find another job." Hannah nodded silently, but her eyes filled with tears as she walked back to the staff room. Her co-workers tried to comfort her, but the damage was done. She didn't return the next day. The manager sighed heavily and started planning yet another round of interviews. It was becoming a problem that could no longer be ignored. The restaurant's reputation was at risk. Customers were beginning to notice how often new faces appeared and disappeared. Some even commented aloud, "Do they ever keep the same waitress here for more than a month?" The constant turnover unsettled regulars, who preferred familiar faces when they dined out. The manager considered speaking to Mr. Donovan directly, but fear held him back. Confronting such a wealthy and influential man felt dangerous. If Mr. Donovan chose to leave and take his business elsewhere, the restaurant would lose not only his generous bills but also the attention his visits brought. As unpleasant as he was, his presence had become part of the restaurant's identity. Among the staff, theories continued to swirl. Some believed Mr. Donovan acted the way he did because he had always lived in a world where people catered to him. Others thought perhaps there was sadness behind his stern behavior, something hidden that no one understood. "Maybe he's lonely," one waitress said softly one night. "Maybe this is just how he talks because he doesn't know how to connect with people." But whatever the reason, it did not change the reality that serving him was unbearable for most. Time after time, the cycle repeated. New faces, hopeful smiles, nervous hands, and finally, disappointed departures. The restaurant became known not just for its excellent food, but also for its endless stream of waitresses who could not endure the infamous guest. One evening, as the staff gathered after closing, they sat around the empty tables, sharing their frustrations. "It's like a curse," one said. "No matter what we do, he finds fault." Another sighed, "I just want one shift without worrying if he'll be here." Little did they know, change was already on its way. A new waitress would soon walk through the doors, one unlike the others. She would face the same challenges, hear the same sharp words, and stand under the same watchful eyes. But she carried something within her that made her different. Where others had walked away, she would stand her ground. And in doing so, she would not only last with Mr. Donovan, she would begin to change the story everyone thought was unchangeable. The restaurant had grown used to the pattern. New faces came, new faces went. Nobody expected anything different anymore. The staff even stopped asking how long a new waitress would last, they simply waited, knowing sooner or later she would leave after serving Mr. Donovan. It was like watching the same story play out again and again. But one chilly morning, the door to the restaurant opened, and a young woman stepped inside. Her name was Sophia. She was not like the others who had come before her. The first thing people noticed was her quiet smile, soft but steady. The second thing was the small curve of her belly. She was expecting a baby. She carried herself carefully, with one hand sometimes resting on her stomach as if to remind herself of the little life growing inside her. Sophia had applied for the job not out of choice but out of necessity. Life had been hard for her in recent months. She needed money to prepare for her child, clothes, food, doctor's visits, and all the little things that added up quickly. She had looked everywhere for work. Some places had turned her away the moment they noticed she was pregnant, saying politely but firmly that they needed someone who could keep up with the pace. This restaurant was one of the few willing to give her a chance. When she first walked into the dining room to meet the manager, some of the older waitresses exchanged glances. "Do you think she knows about him?" one whispered. "She won't last a week," another replied quietly. But when the manager explained the situation, Sophia only nodded. She listened calmly as he said, "There's one customer who is very demanding. He has caused many of our waitresses to leave." Sophia looked him in the eye and said, "I've faced difficulties before. If I can handle that, I can handle one man." There was no arrogance in her voice, no false confidence. It was simple determination, spoken as if she were making a promise to herself. Her first week went smoothly, mostly because Mr. Donovan did not come in. Sophia learned the menu, memorized table numbers, and practiced carrying trays with steady hands. Though her back sometimes ached, and her feet grew sore from standing all day, she never once complained. She knew why she was there. Every tip she earned brought her closer to providing for her child. That thought gave her strength. But soon, the day everyone knew would come finally arrived. The door opened, and in walked Mr. Donovan, dressed in his usual sharp suit, his polished shoes tapping against the floor. The air in the restaurant changed immediately. Conversations softened, and the staff exchanged nervous looks. The manager's eyes darted to Sophia, who happened to be standing nearest to the front. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently. Sophia took a quiet breath and nodded. "Yes. I'll serve him." The other waitresses watched with sympathy. They expected the same outcome they had seen countless times before. Another new hire would walk into Mr. Donovan's storm and come out defeated. But as Sophia walked toward his table, something about her calm steps caught their attention. She wasn't nervous, at least not outwardly. She didn't fidget, didn't force a smile. She simply walked with quiet confidence, her hand brushing her apron as if reminding herself she belonged there. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, placing a menu before him. Mr. Donovan looked up from his phone, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. "You're new," he said flatly. Yes, sir, Sophia replied. My name is Sophia, and I'll be serving you tonight. For a moment, there was silence. It felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. Then Mr. Donovan said, We'll see how long you last. Most waitresses would have lost their composure right there, but Sophia didn't flinch. She simply replied, I hope to serve you well, sir, before stepping back politely. Her calmness seemed to unsettle him. He was used to nervous smiles, shaky voices, and hurried movements. But here was someone who looked him directly in the eye without fear, yet without challenge either. Throughout the evening, he tested her, as he always did. When he ordered water, he complained it wasn't cold enough. Sophia apologized politely, replaced it quickly, and returned without a trace of irritation. When he said the bread was too hard, she listened carefully, brought a fresh basket, and set it down with quiet grace. Not once did she let frustration show on her face. The other staff whispered from a distance, watching closely. She's holding up, one murmured. But just wait, he'll push harder. And he did. Toward the middle of the evening, when Sophia placed his main dish before him, he frowned at the plate. This isn't what I ordered, he said sharply. Most waitresses in that moment would panic, but Sophia remained calm. She leaned slightly forward, checking the dish. Sir, you ordered the grilled salmon with lemon sauce. That's what I brought, she said gently, her tone respectful but steady. For a moment, Mr. Donovan's expression darkened, as though expecting her to apologize and retreat. But when she stood there patiently, not afraid yet not confrontational, he hesitated. Finally, he said, Fine. Leave it. It was a small victory, but an important one. Sophia had not argued. She had not cowered. She had simply spoken the truth with quiet strength. As the evening went on, something unusual happened. Mr. Donovan grew quieter. He still made small remarks, still kept his critical air, but the sharpness in his words began to soften ever so slightly. For the first time, he seemed less like a man trying to control everything and more like someone observing carefully, almost thoughtfully. When Sophia brought the bill at the end of the night, he took it without comment. She waited as he signed, then thanked him politely. As he stood to leave, he looked at her for a long moment and said, You didn't let me get to you. That's new. Sophia smiled faintly and replied, I just want to do my work well, sir. That's all. After he left, the staff rushed to her side. How did you do that? One asked, astonished. You didn't even look shaken. Sophia simply shrugged. I'm not here to fight with him. I'm here to earn for my baby. That's what matters. That night, as she walked home, her steps were tired but steady. She placed her hand on her stomach and whispered softly, We're going to be okay. It was more than just surviving one difficult customer, it was proof that she had the strength to face challenges without losing herself. And though she didn't know it yet, her calm resilience had planted a small seed of change in Mr. Donovan's world. For the first time, someone had faced him without fear or flattery. Someone had stood firm without being unkind. It was the beginning of something no one in the restaurant could have imagined, a story that would break the endless cycle and bring light into a place where shadows had lingered for too long. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the restaurant staff had ever seen before. Everyone was waiting for the familiar cycle to repeat, waiting for Sophia to crumble under the weight of Mr. Donovan's endless demands, waiting for her to walk into the staff room one evening and say she couldn't take it anymore. But to their surprise, that moment never came. Every time Mr. Donovan arrived, Sophia greeted him with the same calm smile. She never forced it, never tried to act overly cheerful. Her smile was small and natural, the kind that came from quiet strength. She didn't rush to flatter him or try to please him with extra attention. She simply did her job carefully, respectfully, and without fear. At first, Mr. Donovan tried to test her. It was what he always did. He would send his water back, ask for a different glass, or question why the plate looked a certain way. Most waitresses would tremble at these comments, apologizing over and over, afraid of making the situation worse. But Sophia had a different way of handling it. She didn't argue, but she also didn't shrink. If something needed fixing, she fixed it. If she knew she had done it right, she explained it calmly, never raising her voice and never sounding upset. One evening, he snapped, "You're too slow with the service." Sophia set down the glass she was carrying, looked at him directly, and said gently, "Sir, I'm doing my best. I promise I'll take care of you as quickly as I can, but I also need to make sure everything is done properly." Her voice was steady, respectful, but firm enough to make her point clear. For a moment, the whole restaurant seemed to freeze. The staff waited for Mr. Donovan to explode, for him to walk out in anger or demand the manager fire her on the spot. But to their astonishment, he said nothing. He simply stared at her for a long moment, then returned to his meal in silence. From that night forward, something began to change. His remarks didn't vanish, but they lost some of their sharpness. He still noticed small details, but his tone was less cutting. Where once he might have made a waitress cry with a single word, now his comments felt more like habits than weapons. The staff noticed the shift immediately. "She's the only one who's ever stood her ground," one of the cooks whispered. "And he didn't tear her apart for it." "She's not afraid of him," another waitress said. "That's the difference. She respects him, but she doesn't let him walk over her." The other waitresses began to watch Sophia closely, hoping to learn from her. They saw how she carried herself, never rushing, never panicking, even when mistakes happened. If a plate came out wrong from the kitchen, she handled it without drama. If Mr. Donovan criticized something, she listened, corrected it if needed, and moved on. She never wasted energy on fear, and because of that, she never gave him power over her. One night, when the restaurant was quieter than usual, Mr. Donovan surprised everyone by asking Sophia a question. "Why do you keep working here?" he asked suddenly as she poured his water. Sophia looked at him, her expression calm. "Because I need to," she said simply. "Everyone else runs away," he remarked, studying her. "You don't." "Why?" Sophia hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand lightly on her belly. "Because I'm not just working for myself, sir. I'm working for my baby. I don't have the choice to walk away." For the first time, Mr. Donovan's eyes softened. He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. There was a flicker of something in his expression, something the staff had never seen before. It wasn't anger, or impatience, or criticism. It was something closer to recognition, as though he had suddenly remembered a part of himself he had long forgotten. After that night, his behavior continued to shift in small ways. He still demanded good service, but he no longer snapped at her for every little thing. When she was busy with other tables, he waited a little longer than usual without complaint. Sometimes, instead of criticizing, he would simply watch her as she worked, almost as though he was studying her calmness and trying to understand it. The staff couldn't believe their eyes. "Is he changing?" one whispered. "It looks like it," another replied, shaking her head in disbelief. All because of her. Sophia didn't see herself as special. To her, she was just doing what she had to do, holding her ground, staying steady, and focusing on her reason for being there. But to everyone else, it was remarkable. She had done what no one else could. She had lasted with Mr. Donovan, not by pleasing him, not by avoiding him, but by meeting him with quiet dignity. The turning point came one rainy evening. The restaurant was almost empty, with only a few tables occupied. Mr. Donovan sat in his usual corner, reading something on his phone. Sophia approached with his order, carefully setting down the plate. As she did, he looked up at her and said quietly, "You remind me of someone." Sophia paused, curious but silent, waiting for him to continue. "My wife," he said finally. His voice was softer than anyone had ever heard it. "She passed away years ago. She never let me get away with nonsense either." For a long moment, Sophia didn't know what to say. She could see a trace of sadness in his eyes, hidden beneath the hard shell he usually wore. Gently, she replied, "She must have been a strong woman." Mr. Donovan nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to his plate. He didn't say anything more, but the weight of his words lingered in the air. For the first time, the staff began to understand that perhaps his sharpness wasn't just cruelty, it was a shield, a way of hiding pain he had never truly faced. From that night on, the relationship between Sophia and Mr. Donovan shifted even further. He never became openly warm or cheerful, but he grew more respectful. He no longer looked at her as though waiting for a mistake. Instead, there were moments, small, fleeting, but real, when he seemed to see her not just as a waitress, but as a person. The other staff noticed the difference too. The atmosphere on the nights he visited was no longer filled with dread. Instead of whispering nervously, they carried on with their work, knowing Sophia could handle him. Even the manager, who had once feared losing staff every time Mr. Donovan walked in, felt a sense of relief. And Sophia herself? She remained steady, as she always had. She didn't expect him to change completely, nor did she treat him any differently from her other customers. But deep inside, she felt something important had happened. By standing firm without anger, by showing respect without fear, she had touched a part of Mr. Donovan that no one else had been able to reach. What started as another chapter in the long cycle of waitresses had become something else entirely. It was no longer the story of a rude millionaire driving people away. It was the beginning of a story where understanding, patience, and quiet strength had the power to soften even the hardest hearts. And though none of them knew how far this change would go, everyone in the restaurant sensed it. The story was no longer the same. What had once been a place of tension whenever Mr. Donovan walked in had slowly become a place of calm. The other waitresses still remembered the fear and frustration of serving him, but now, they didn't worry as much. They knew Sophia was there, and somehow, she had found a way to steady the storm. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Donovan never asked for a new server. He always wanted Sophia. Even if other waitresses offered to take his table, he refused. "She knows how to handle things," he would say, his voice clipped but clear. It was the closest he had ever come to giving a compliment. Sophia, meanwhile, continued her work with the same quiet strength. She never acted differently with him than with any other customer. She served his food carefully, listened patiently, and treated him with respect. But she also never allowed herself to be treated as less than she was. That balance, firmness mixed with kindness, became her strength, and it slowly reshaped Mr. Donovan in ways no one thought possible. One evening, the restaurant was busier than usual. A large party had reserved several tables, and the staff was rushing to keep up. Orders were flying in, trays clattered as they moved from the kitchen to the dining area, and voices overlapped with laughter and chatter. In the middle of all this, Mr. Donovan arrived, dressed as sharply as always, his expression unreadable. Sophia, balancing plates in her arms, greeted him with her usual calm smile. "Good evening, sir. I'll be with you in just a moment," she said as she hurried past to serve another table. For the first time, he didn't complain about waiting. He simply sat back and watched her work, noticing how carefully she balanced her duties, serving her guests, checking on the kitchen, and moving swiftly despite the weight she carried in more ways than one. She wasn't just carrying trays anymore, she was carrying the responsibility of her unborn child, and it showed in the quiet determination of every step she took. Later that night, after she finally placed his order in front of him, Mr. Donovan looked at her and said something that shocked everyone within earshot. "You work too hard. You should sit down for a while." The staff nearly dropped their trays. Mr. Donovan, the man who once criticized napkin folds and water temperatures, was showing concern. Sophia only smiled gently and replied, "Thank you, sir, but I'm fine. I'm used to working hard." There was no more said, but the remark stayed in everyone's mind. It was a sign, clear and undeniable, that the man who had once made waitresses cry was no longer the same. As weeks passed, Sophia's belly grew rounder, and it became harder to hide her tiredness. Still, she showed up every day, determined to save as much as she could before her baby arrived. The staff supported her as best they could, sometimes taking on heavier trays or covering tables so she could rest for a moment. But no one admired her more than Mr. Donovan, though he never said it aloud. One rainy night, when the restaurant was nearly empty, Sophia brought his bill to the table. Mr. Donovan signed it quietly, then paused before handing it back. Along with the receipt, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Sophia looked down at it, confused. "What's this, sir?" she asked softly. "Open it," he said simply. She unfolded the paper and gasped. Inside was a check in amount larger than she had ever seen in her life. More than enough to cover her hospital expenses, baby supplies, and months of rent. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you giving this to me?" Mr. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his expression softer than anyone had ever seen it. "Because you reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago," he said. "You reminded me of what it feels like to be treated like a person. Everyone else has either feared me or flattered me. You did neither. You stood your ground, but you also respected me. That takes strength. And I can see you'll need even more strength when your child arrives." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes, but she blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of him. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Thank you isn't enough." "You don't need to say anything," he replied firmly. "Just take care of your child. That's all." When he left that evening, the staff crowded around Sophia, their eyes wide with disbelief. "What did he give you?" one whispered. When she showed them the check, their jaws dropped. "I can't believe it," another said. "The same man who used to make us all miserable, did that." It was almost impossible to believe, yet it was real. Mr. Donovan, the man who had once been known as the rude millionaire, had shown a side no one expected, a side that carried kindness hidden beneath all the sharpness. From then on, his visits were no longer dreaded. The staff no longer whispered nervously when he entered. Instead, they carried on with their work, knowing he had changed, at least in the small but important way that mattered most. He was still precise, still particular, but he no longer used his words to wound. And whenever he saw Sophia, his expression softened, even if only slightly. For Sophia, life continued to move forward. The day finally came when she left the restaurant to prepare for her baby's arrival. Her co-workers hugged her tightly, promising to visit her and help however they could. Even Mr. Donovan, though he never attended gatherings or parties, sent her a simple card with a short note inside, "For you and your child. You have my respect." When her baby was born, healthy and strong, Sophia held the child in her arms and thought back to all the nights she had worked tirelessly at the restaurant. She thought of every glass she had poured, every plate she had carried, and every sharp word she had faced without letting it break her. All of it had led to this moment. She whispered softly to her baby, "We made it." Back at the restaurant, the staff often told her story to new hires. "You should have seen it," they would say. "There was a time when no waitress could last with him. Then Sophia came along, and everything changed." The tale became almost legendary among the staff, a reminder that courage and patience could do what fear and frustration never could. And Mr. Donovan? He continued to dine there, but he was never quite the same again. People still noticed his sharp eyes and his precise ways, but beneath it all, there was something different, something gentler. Whenever someone asked why he only wanted Sophia to serve him, he would simply reply, "Because she treated me like a human being." The story of Sophia and the rude millionaire was retold many times over, each version carrying the same lesson. Sometimes, one person's quiet strength can change not only their own life, but also the life of someone everyone else had given up on. In the end, it was not wealth, power, or fear that lasted, it was respect, patience, and the unshakable determination of a woman who knew she had something greater to fight for. And so, the man who once drove every waitress away left behind a very different memory. Not of harsh words or sharp demands, but of the day he finally softened because one brave, pregnant waitress chose to stand her ground with dignity and heart.